Okay, here we go. We've done all the introductions. So we've put together a bit of a background just to help people get a bit of an understanding on citizen science and fish and why we're doing things. The key thing we're also going to share is a discussion on perceived strengths and weaknesses in citizen science and fish. And just hold with me, there's a couple more people in the waiting room. I'll admit those. Then we're also going to try and talk about some recommendations and how we can help citizen science for fish and marine in Australia. So this particular slide, I've been sharing a bit on social media over the past month, particularly in January when it was quiet, to try and get a bit of an understanding of citizen science, both in the marine environment and on land, and which apps and organisations cross over in both, or which are strictly marine, and how long they've been going. And way back a couple of centuries, there was traditional owners, but there was also people collecting shells and seaweed and coral and other things. And what I'll call modern day citizen science, I think really started with recreational fishers with game fishing. And then in the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a real boost in citizen science, particularly with diving and snorkeling. iNaturalist globally has been a great boost, but citizen science in the marine environment is still relatively small compared to apps and groups such as eBird. Citizen science can make a major difference, and this was an article by Steve Sarling, who thought that recreational fishing could be a game changer, particularly for social license. And there's been a bit of research. This is reasonably old, over 10 years old, but it shows that a lot of citizen science is focused on animals and wildlife. Not a lot on marine. This particular research showed only about 7%, but there would obviously be some overlap. And then they've also got aquatic biodiversity at about 2%. iNaturalist, it's great to have Mark Magruder online. The Australasian Fish Project has been a game changer. One of the things that I also shared as part of this presentation of which are the most observed species by state. And I'll point out bluefin leatherjacket. There's been over 17,000 observations there, and mostly those have been dead fish washed up according to the recent algal blooms in South Australia. So there's a real boom there. Quite a lot of observations of blue groper in New South Wales, damselfish in Queensland, and less observations in Tasmania and Northern Territory. And I also questioned, what about the other things that are really important to the community for seafood or recreational fishing? Yes, they are recorded, but not so much in some apps like iNaturalist. And certainly the work that Bill Sornock is doing, one of his key species is, barramundi and bass and so forth. But, coral trout, snapper, whiting, flathead sharks, a lot of those things are measured, but possibly more by commercial fishers rather than recreational fishers. And some recreational fishers are not that keen on sharing some of their data. I'm also really interested in people. So I used AI to try and see who are some of the leaders in the Australian marine science community. And this mob came up. We've got Greta and myself there. Anne Hoggett was a real pioneer at the Lizard Island Research Station. I caught up with Rick Stewart-Smith recently. He's at UTAS and helped co-found Reef Life Survey, and Australia's chief scientist is there. But there's also some key people missing as well, and particularly some of the recreational fishers. And, great to have Bill here today, who's been doing citizen science on fish for well over 40 years. I've tried to sum a few things together in terms of giving you a perspective, particularly looking at different sectors, community, university, government, business, etc., management, who does what. looking for parallels, gaps, and opportunities. And quite a lot do tagging. The university powerhouses, I think, really are UTAS. The community with iNaturalist, Sharks and Rays, Infofish, there's some BioBlitzers, Reef Check Australia, the Great Victorian Fish Count, Ozfish with their habitat rehabilitation, and there's some global ones like the Great Egg Case Hunt, and then eDNA is also being used by almost everyone now. And then there's a whole lot of government programs with fishers collecting frames, reporting pest fishes, reporting endangered and threatened species, etc. So it's not a be all and end all, this table, but it's to get you thinking. And then another perspective, there's been a lot on sharks lately, particularly shark incidents. So this encouraged me to see what sort of information is available and collected by citizen scientists, both globally, within Australia and state. Some of the data is available and some isn't. And Greta, you'll see from RedMap, which is largely about range extension, but there are some shark sightings for grey nurse and tiger. iNaturalist has about 17,000 observations of 126 species. And then most of the others, such as the grey nurse Shark Watch, tend to focus on one species. So that gives you a bit of a feel. Some of our peak bodies, like Atlas of Living Australia, have got some data available on the web, but it hasn't been refreshed for 10 years. And I guess this was one of the other reasons that I was really keen to have this discussion, that in Queensland, where citizen science is really well funded and organised, and the data does lead to management, particularly in regional and reef report cards, one of the things that many of us are fond of is marine fish. There were some major gaps. So the report cards were reporting water quality, coral, seagrass, freshwater fish, but not marine fish. And there'd been a number of discussions over a few years about why not and what we could do. So those highlights in red have prompted me to do some thinking and to get this group together. The link between the community and government depends on strategic documents. And Greta, you were fantastic as a real leader, you know, with this occasional paper back in 2015. And I guess we're looking at what can we do now in 2026, something similar. We've started it with this discussion paper, but having these strategic documents that are co-written by government and the community, and particularly peak bodies like AXA, is absolutely key. And there's been several good examples of where that has been done, but I'll point out that we haven't been able to find an Australian government citizen science strategy. There's a couple of state ones. There's some key local government that do citizen science, and some of them are recognised there, but again, they share information, not a lot of strategy. Again, here's some work that's been done before with AXA, which is a relatively new organisation compared to a lot of the others in this meeting, but they've done some work, particularly with New South Wales, on co-developing strategy documents for citizen science. Here's another perspective of who does citizen science in Australia, again from that 2014 report. The big players, according to Roteman, are universities, community groups, state government, and others a bit less, clubs, libraries, philanthropic organisations. But I think a lot has changed in 10 years. And it means a whole lot of different things to different people, from research to community engagement to capacity building to conservation to awareness. I'm going to hand over to Stephanie to talk a little bit about the next couple of slides, and just let me know when you want to change them, Steph. So here's the first SWOT analysis.
Brilliant. I suppose what we wanted to try and do is, this is like a first attempt, and we really will sort of welcome everybody's sort of contributions. And really what we wanted to see, well, what are those some strengths and weaknesses of the citizen science community in Australia? Obviously, there's a lot, though we don't know the specifics. You know, Adam's done a sort of general, assessment of what who are the citizen science. We'd like to sort of have a bit of nuance on the types of citizen scientists that are out there. We have a very strong and large fisher community in Australia. Universities are being actively now involved in research around citizen science or using citizen science as a tool. And we've had that uptick in, or really that major change in being able to technologies really supporting the data sharing and data collection as well, iNaturalist being one of those as well. And again, there are a number of different projects around. So I think we do have the basis in Australia around citizen science in the fish and marine space. But again, as Adam's pointed out, we're sort of limited in some of that strategic planning, specifically around citizen science. We have a number of the organisations that support citizen science have their own organisational strategies, but what is that national picture, and how can we also look at that in a domain specific way, whether it's fish or marine as well, because there may be differences in the types of approaches as well. One of the significant things I think is that core funding for those community-based citizen science projects as well. And again, there's sort of limited corporate business support as well for citizen science, though there are some, organisations that do support that. I think Ozfish is one of those as well. And again, the engagement with traditional owners and Indigenous peoples as well, I think it's really important to sort of understand that overlap between citizen science, traditional knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge as well. Next slide, Adam. And I think overlap, obviously the counter to those strengths and weaknesses are some of the opportunity spaces. And I think that's really where can we support integration of the concept and the approaches around citizen science into planning and implementation documents that both organisations are doing, but also government and their government planning, both at the national, state, territory level as well. And also can't forget also that sort of local government on the ground activity as well. So I think the opportunity will be around how can we support that, support that. Money is obviously a really important part, but I do think building some of those strategies, those requirements to sort of implement and use citizen science, I think will be useful as well. Whether it's a threat or not, but research organisations have their own funding as well. Where does that overlap with support for communities to undertake citizen science as well? And I think a key one that we're always very interested in AXA perspective is that citizen science is just not seen as free labour or that they're just seen as data collectors as well. I think we really want to try and push that two-way feedback that, sure, a lot of people, government, others may use citizen science-based data, but what's the feedback mechanism to those citizens around recognising their contribution and how that data is actually going to be used in one form or another as well. And I think, there is a cost associated with undertaking citizen science and citizen science project, both at those organisations that support citizen science in one form or another, but actually undertaking a citizen science project, whether it's a BioBlitz or, a specific project as well. And how do we support the training of those people? And again, I think it's changing, I must admit, from way back when it was very hard to, Greta, we talked to this, very hard to convince governments about what the sort of benefit of citizen science is. I do think there is an increase in that. And again, it's not just about government, it's also about how do we sort of change the mindset or open the opportunities for other participants in citizen science at that community level. And next slide. Adam, you'll talk to this one.
Yeah, so I've tried to put this together because it is an absolute jigsaw, but often government really measures success and cost with dollars. So our Australian government invests around $40 billion in terms of research and development, and we say that there's about 2 million people involved in STEM. I've really tried hard to find an accurate figure for the investment in citizen science, but it's roughly around 10 million from federal government. I'd like to think it was a lot more. So if there's an R&D benefit, then it seems like the community is investing about 1.999 billion by about 1 million people. There's also great multiplier effects for money spent with citizen science as well. So I guess we're really keen just to start a discussion about how we can get scientists and citizen scientists working together for maximum efficiency and maximum benefits. And starting that discussion by trying to put some figures on it. I'll go to the next slide, Stephanie.
Yeah, and I suppose that's partly what we've tried to do in the discussion paper as well, and we'd sort of welcome your thoughts on this as well. And we've used the work that Jack Nunn did recently or late last year in a sort of through a community of practice approach as well, talking to a variety of citizen science or stakeholders involved in citizen science, and came up with 10 recommendations around citizen science. So we sort of based some of our suggested approaches or recommendations on those recommendations as such. Obviously recognize these some of these recommendations are sort of broader than citizen science purely in a fish or marine perspective as well, but I think they're equally applicable both at different scales or across different focus areas as well. And I think one of the things we want to support is or highlight as well is the need to support those sort of backbone organisations, not just AXA but others, usually who are not-for-profits in one form or another, who are supporting citizen science on the ground as well, because those organisations, they are about project, they provide project management, knowledge brokering, communication, and create that connectivity between science, community, and others as well. And I think I mentioned as well, one of those opportunity areas, what does a national citizen science strategy look like? How do we look at particular focus areas? Obviously, there's a lot in the environment space, terrestrial area, but what about marine fish? It could be species-based or landscape-based as well. I do think, and lots of people have looked at this too, is that the real need to improve partnerships or STEM and STEM education, not only from increasing the sort of visibility of that, but how do we look at the career pathways and under the review of the national marine thing, the marine plan. I think there's a key component talked to as well. That education can be really around some of those methodologies, even sort of incorporation of citizen science methodologies into university courses as well. And I think teachers and mentoring and supporting teachers is fundamental as well. Communication, obviously the communication component is really important in terms of increasing awareness with the public, not only in the public participation in projects, but also that ability to really share and show the benefit that citizen science is having. I'll add another one that's not on this list as well, and I think we've talked about it, the importance to fund citizen projects in themselves. There was back in probably a couple of years now ago, Inspiring Australia did have a $10 million specific citizen science grant, but there was a $30 million ask. So it was so popular that there was a $30 million ask for really a $10 million pot of money. And Adam's alluded to it as well. I think what's really important too is actually understanding the scale and scope of citizen science in Australia. And I think if we, not only in the number of projects, who's undertaking, but what are the, I suppose perhaps doing an impact evaluation or assessment, what is the value, whether it's economic, benefit, social, environmental benefit from citizen science. And I think that would be an amazing tool for advocacy in Australia for all organisations around this space. So that's also on that list that we have within these recommendations. And we'd really welcome your thoughts and ideas around each of those as well. Adam, to you.
So we have prepared a discussion paper. It's about 15 pages. It could also be called a white paper. It is a draft. We started in January and, put the draft together for 6th of February. We would welcome other people to, join us as co-authors to help shape it if you think there's value in that. We've also got 6 questions associated with that discussion paper, and a form and a QR code that you can respond to provide some feedback, and you can also circulate it through your networks. That's about half an hour, so I'm going to stop sharing the presentation now and go back to the view of all of us. And if you'd like to make a comment, if you could use the little raise your hand on the screen, please do that. You're also welcome to put something in the chat room, but this is a collaborative discussion. So let's see where it goes. We've got at least half an hour.
I'll ask a question maybe, and is what's missing? I don't know if anybody's had a chance, but what do people think is missing from the paper? One thing I thought of was around biosecurity, marine biosecurity, and a lot of the citizen science that's happening there. So I don't know. Welcome people's thoughts on what's missing.
So I'll also just share with you, I think a few people will be aware that we've had a Australian National Marine Science Plan, 2015 to 2025. They're currently reviewing it for the next decade. There's 21 white papers associated with that. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity where we'll share our white paper with them. And I've pretty much been told, sorry, you're too late. We've been working on this for several years. Greta.
Yeah, so I was involved in the white paper process rather unwillingly, but yeah, and they suggested a set of, I forget how many it was, 20 topics, and there was a process where you could apply to be part of that, and then you could also, as part of that, you could also suggest other topics, which a heap of us did, and not a single one of them was accepted. So they ran with their original set of papers, and we did try and sort of insert citizen science in a few places where we could. So hopefully that's been retained. But yeah, I haven't actually gone in and had another look to see if that's in there. There was one on marine social science, for example, where that was mentioned quite a few times. And I forget what the other papers where there were CitSci mentions were, but there was definitely in there to some extent. And yeah, I'm not surprised that they said no, because they said no to everything. So yeah, I'm not sure if that helps at all, but
thanks for that insight.
Yeah. There's also no funding for that, and the National Marine Science Committee unfortunately doesn't report to any minister or any government body. So there's, we all participate in the process because as a research community we see value in having these strategic documents and creating some alignment, and I guess they're useful in terms of trying to identify or push for other funding sources and avenues, but they're not really there's no funding associated with them. So there's could be an argument for what's their role anyway.
Yeah, and I think in general in Australia science funding is being cut rather than increased, so it's challenging times.
Yeah, it's very challenging in the university sector at the moment, as I'm sure it is in many places.
Yep. Let's talk about some successes as well. Cassie from Ozfish, I'm going to put you on the spot. What did you think about the presentation, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities?
I think there's a huge opportunity here. There's a massive void at the moment. I know that the wreck fishing sector is coming. Oops. I've got a bit of feedback, is coming along with their thinking on data and the citizen science space. We talked about it a lot at the Recreational Fishing Forum last year in Australia, and we'll have the opportunity to do that again next year if we want to expand on that topic. We'll hold another forum in 2027. So just an opportunity for a link into the fishing community there. I think there's two parts. I mean, the funding's always an issue and resourcing is always an issue, but I think the coordination piece is also missing. Everybody's doing little bits, including us. And Steph, this is where I think having AXA involved is so awesome. And I know I had some early conversations, and we became a member, maybe nearly 2 years ago now. Because that sort of coordinating place, not even a piece, not even the work, but a place, I think is something that is going to be really, really important to citizen science for fish and for the marine space as we go forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Cassie. Anyone else like to make a comment or a suggestion or share their dream for the future? How about you, Bill Sornock? You've been doing this longer than anyone, and you've got some amazing dashboards that you've been sharing with me and government. What do you hope is going to happen in 2026?
I guess what we make happen is more important than what we would like to see happen. We're in the process of working with the International Game Fish Association in America on worldwide voluntary voluntary tagging programs, having a video conference as we did back in 2023. And that's to look at sharing and collaborating more in that space. So I think that's going to be important. We're looking at every continent in the world being involved in that. There are over 5 million tagged fish through voluntary programs around the world, and we don't really have any idea on how to bring all that together. So that'll be one of the things that we'll be looking at there. Just on our own front is we're continuing to expand our dashboards. As I said, there's around about 3,000 maps and graphs in them now, which I think collectively is a pretty sizable data set to work through, and that covers pretty much all of Queensland. But it also deals with not only the fish, but it also deals with the people that are catching the fish. So we'll be continuing in 2026. We'll certainly be continuing to develop those dashboards. We've introduced AI into the running of the program, so we expect to get a lot of advantage in being able to use AI to take care of some of the resourcing issues that we have.
Thanks, Bill. Bridie raised her hand. Over to you.
I didn't raise my hand. I applauded what Bill was saying. But I also put sort of a question in the chat before, which I can speak to, which of the recommendations that we've currently got in there, and to Bill's statement about it's not what we hope for, it's what we will actually achieve. Of those 10 recommendations, I'm curious as to what, if we could only focus all of our collective resources and efforts on one of them, what could that one potentially be so that we can get the ball rolling, get in front of the right people, and then generate the resources and funding and interest that we need to succeed on all the others?
Jodie Salmond, I'm going to put you on.
It was a metaphorical question. Yeah, that's fine.
Jodie Salmond, I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer that question, but like Bill, you've been doing marine citizen science for a long time on a shoestring. What would you like for the future, for the next, couple of years, and how are we collectively going to make it happen?
I really don't have an answer to that, because I think after many, many conversations with yourself, Adam, and with a lot of the people in this virtual room, actually, we seem to continue to come up with it against the same kind of things. And the biggest issues are, yes, that idea of true collaboration, which does occur, it's proof here, but it has to be backed up by funding all along the way. And that's the sentiment that's in the chat consistently, is like, yeah, everybody likes shiny new things. And so how do we consistently keep up to date, but actually maintain these long-term projects? And the reality is, that it is really, really hard, and on a shoestring certainly takes its toll for staff, volunteers, everyone over time. So I guess I'm really interested in the results that some of the papers have shared. We've done lots of the behavioural science of looking at why people volunteer, what they get out of it, and therefore how is that actually going to shape the future, and how do we get more people involved. But some really beautiful comments that have been coming up, and some of the things that you've mentioned in the SWOT analysis as well, and some of those opportunities. But I do think unless we can start having these big conversations at those top levels, as was mentioned, it was actually brought up and yet it wasn't integrated anyway. So how do we get that into the next step? Because at the end of the day, without funding, that is still going to be one of the key components. We've got beautiful, passionate people throughout here, but without funding, how do we actually continue to strive? So sounds like a little bit of a downer, but I guess that's consistently what happens for us, right? Is we're in this terrible cycle of everybody wants us to do things, and everybody consistently asks for our data, but nobody wants to pay us to do it or to pay for the data. So
Sophie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think Cara had her hand up before if she wants to jump in, but happy to speak.
I don't know. You go first, Sophie. That's okay. I'll go after.
Okay, no dramas. I think a word that I am hearing come up a lot is collaboration, and I really hear you, Jody. Like this is very hard without funding, and citizens have been very fortunate to be, one of the recipients of, a pretty major grant recently, along with Adam, and I acknowledge that. It's not. We're very privileged to kind of be in this position. But I guess I also want to share a bit of a success story recently. And I'm kind of speaking across two organizations here, because my current role at Citizens of the Reef is as a marine operations coordinator. So we run the Great Reef Census, we plan various expeditions and trips and stuff like that. But I also volunteer for Reef Life Survey. And, we've mentioned Rick Stewart Smith and Graham Edgar. And I just came back from the Christmas holidays, actually, from a collaborative expedition with Reef Life Survey and the Great Reef Census. And I kind of want to throw this out here as a bit of an idea and a bit of a success story, I suppose, that we are always looking for opportunities for resource sharing, particularly for expeditions and trips. So we were able to do this trip over about 2 or 3 weeks, where we conducted both snorkel surveys for the Great Reef Census, and also we did dives on various days for Reef Life Survey and collected detailed transect surveys and species level IDs and all of that kind of thing. So it's a great story of these two things working together. At that point, it was like a in-kind contribution of like food and fuel and stuff like that, but we're also looking at other opportunities, working with some of the eDNA researchers, where we could have eDNA researchers and census on the same vessel to go out and do these collaborative expeditions together. So I just want to put that out there, that for Great Reef Census 7, so that'll be from September through 26 through to Jan 27. We're always looking at opportunities for resource sharing, collaborative expeditions, and we've seen from this that it can work really well and benefit both organizations. So a little bit of good news, maybe.
Thanks, Sophie. Cara?
Yeah, hi. So I was just gonna point out, completely agree. Like, I think that there's an issue with the government funding new shiny things and not supporting the longevity of existing programs, because ensuring the longevity of existing programs is really important for organisations like mine. So we're a data end user, and data that we use for the purpose of our report cards has to come from long-standing monitoring programs to be considered for incorporation into these key decision-making tools or management action tools, which sit under broader government level like policies like the Reef 2050 plan. So I think that, like, I don't know if that's missing from the weakness in the SWOT analysis, is that continued funding for like well-established and existing citizen science programs. And one of the other things too is I noticed in the weaknesses, it does say things like limited corporate/business funding of citizen science, but I don't know if you want to tease that out a little bit, because it might not necessarily be asking these businesses for monetary figures. It might be getting these businesses on board with incorporating things like 2 paid days off for their team members to participate in like citizen science activities. Because one of the things that we've noticed and this is a part of data that we received from CSIRO with the social economic long-term monitoring program, or the CELTEMP surveys, is between 2021 and 2024, stewardship activities took a significant, I won't say the word significant, we didn't statistically analyze it, but they took a toll. So there was a decrease in the amount of people that were engaging in stewardship activities. And the reasoning for that is they said that they don't do this, and the option was other. But what's not written in there as an option is time. So I'm going out on an assumption that people just don't have the time to engage in these citizen science activities because they can't afford to take the days off. A lot of citizen science activities are now being held during weekdays because of resource management or costs to pay staff from the organization that is running the activities. It's more expensive to have staff on the weekends, so they're looking at doing things on weekdays. But people are working full time with cost of living; they can't afford to take the day off. So I don't know if that's something that we want to tease out as part of this discussion paper, is that corporate and business funding or support for citizen science doesn't have to necessarily be a monetary figure. It can be something that's written into their enterprise agreements or contracts with their staff to say that we will pay you for a day or two if you engage in voluntary activities such as citizen science.
And Cara, totally agree. I always believe a day on the water or a day on the field is worth 10 days in the office. And particularly from a health and happiness perspective, it can be hugely motivating. So it would be good if that was recognised. I guess I'm also raising the health aspect as well, as more and more people are desk bound and homebound and don't go outdoors as much. There are benefits getting people exercising and swimming and fishing and breathing fresh air. How do we measure that and quantify that and leverage that for funding as well?
Well, I don't know, Matt, maybe if you're still online, you could talk to that about the surveys that are being run. I mean, this is specifically in the reef catchment, so it's not at a national level, but there's some questions that are tailored to well-being in those surveys. And I know that like most organizations, they run staff surveys, yearly staff surveys. So there could be internal measures within their organization to see if staff wellbeing goes up as a result of having this, paid day to get out and engage in these activities, or whether it might not necessarily be individual days, but a paid business day collectively as a team for them to go out and engage in a citizen science activity. So yeah, I'm just wondering if that can just be written somewhere or recognised somewhere as an approach.
I'll just jump in quickly, Cara. I think you've raised a couple of great questions there, and we haven't explored the answer. We haven't investigated them yet, but they're definitely high on our list. Thanks.
Yeah.
Just in terms of corporates and in-kind support and stuff like that too, I think one of the strengths here at Citizens is our really unique tech partnerships, and we've had a lot of in-kind support through web developers and coding, AI, had some really unique partnerships in that space. So sometimes it's not always a direct monetary contribution, but the value of what these developers are doing is actually quite high. So looking in that space in the corporate world as well.
Yeah. And certainly a lot of us are from Queensland. There used to be a Reef Citizen Science Alliance. It was set up by Great Barrier Reef Foundation, but it's since died. So any of these sort of collaborative organisations need a leader and need resourcing and need the opportunity to get together, which is kind of what we're doing online, but face to face and going in the field and expeditions is where the magic really does happen.
And I think if we look at some of those former, business models about how, like in a very broad sense of that concept, like Sophie was Cara was mentioning about, understanding how businesses can support. I think that's a really important information to collect and collate and to sort of advocate around as well. I mean, I think, you can always, not always, sorry, it's hard to find project specific stuff, but I do think we have a much bigger leveraging effect if we can support those organisations that communicate and can sort of get people participating potentially. So again, I think I put in the chat, welcome people's thoughts on doing that as one of those sort of low hanging fruit, just getting some information around that, how people are, what types of activities they're doing. They're just general reference in the paper, but welcome other people's thoughts on that.
Anyone who hasn't said anything so far, now's your chance to make a comment, whether it's, what you liked about the information sharing or the questions, what was missing, what you're going to do to help us move forward. I'm going to put some people on the spot. Barra Dave, what do you reckon? And then Jody. Yeah, you're still muted. Yep, that's good. You might
have a person who.
Yeah, go on.
In some of the projects that.
Sorry, mate, you're cutting in and out. We might have to get you to put something in the chat room. I'm going to go to Jody, then Susan to say a few things.
I was just thinking in terms of the business side of stuff, it'd be really interesting to hear, and maybe this is for further discussion down the track, but we get asked quite a lot about different businesses wanting to come and participate. But then there's actually quite a lot of coordination required for groups to come out. So really, it also means like when people go, oh, yeah, we've got 2 people that want to come out for a day. Cool. Like actually, there's a lot of paperwork on our behalf to get 2 people on a boat to go anywhere. And then a lot of people don't want to go and do a cleanup, which is usually the easiest entry point. So that's where we kind of tend to offer as engagement in that first point. So I think it's getting really clear with businesses as well. When they want to come and donate time, it is actually beautiful. We love that opportunity, but also it's about having some minimums. How many people? What kind of activities do you want? It's almost setting a framework to go, we would love to have you join on any of these activities. And that's definitely from our end, we would need a little bit more, whatever it is, that's for us to set up a little bit better. But we just have a lot of inquiries. And I think there might be a little bit of a miscommunication gap overall of businesses just thinking that, because you're an NGO, you'll just love to have people, right? Like that's, but actually there's a lot more work to it, and it often creates more work than the value. There is a really strong piece that, yes, as we've spoken about, mental health, connection, the feel good factor, meeting new people with shared interests, all of that is extremely valuable. But there has to be a better way of doing it, I think, as well, because at the moment it doesn't necessarily work out in the positive for us.
Yep. Susan, what would you like to share from the webinar today and your thoughts about citizen science?
I'm not up with. I'm not a professional like everybody here, but I can only speak as someone who's come in right at the ground level, not knowing a single fish name 6 years ago, to now doing a PhD, and creating a website and basically funding everything myself. And on a very small island where, you know, there's a lot of people who don't take what you're doing seriously. So yeah, look, it's been a bit of a battle, I have to say, but I mean, things like getting iNaturalist observations for Norfolk Island recognised by the Atlas of Living Australia. That was a big thing because they just ignored anything from iNaturalist. I noticed that the state by state fishes thing that you did the other day didn't include Norfolk Island. Because Norfolk Island is not considered to be part of Australia by iNaturalist, even though I've asked. So things like that are kind of important for a small place like here because of opportunities for grant fundings. If we don't even get on the radar, we don't get anywhere in terms of grant funding. So yeah, we've got a tiny, tiny little inshore reef. As a citizen scientist, I've been able to add a lot to the biodiversity that we know about in there. But yeah, you're doing it on your own. Yeah.
And you're doing a great job too.
Thank you. I have to say that the Australian Citizen Science Association sort of gave me the first leg up when they had that conference in COVID, and it was online for the first time, and they gave me a free spot, which was fantastic. I haven't forgotten that.
Toby, I'm going to put you on the spot a bit just to give us a bit of an update on FRDC and citizen science, what you've been and your committees have been focusing on over the last couple of years and where it might go into the future.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So my main exposure to citizen science through FRDC has been through our recreational research coordination program, which Cassie is a member of. And they're very interested in citizen science and see it as a real sort of focus area moving forward. We've just completed a project with Bridie and her team that was, you know, about, I mean, Bridie would be better to speak to this than I am, but basically about providing a recipe or roadmap for groups, you know, the thought was fishing clubs, but it could equally apply to other community groups who are interested in getting citizen science projects up off the ground, that essentially steps them through, you know, what you need to do, the pitfalls, how they might be overcome, and also how to look at some of those sort of the barriers to uptake of citizen science that we've sort of heard a bit about today. And look, today's discussion has been really good and has touched on all those things that we all know are issues. I really like the point that Cassie raised and that Jody also touched on there in terms of, you know, when you just get volunteers kind of given to you and you know, here's some people, you'll love this kind of thing. I think the real need there for that coordination piece, and we see this across, you know, not just citizen science, but other research areas as well, where there can be a lot of interest and a lot of disparate stuff going on, but the value of having that central place or you know, we hear that sort of community of practice term a lot at the moment, but yeah, I think there's a bit of momentum building behind citizen science at the moment, and probably great to try and get some sort of forum or place or whatever in where you can see some of that coordination happen, because as everyone's acknowledged, resources are really tight, and that there's you need to make the best with everything that's available to you and so on. So I think that's a sort of a fundamental plank to build going ahead.
Thanks. Look, it's just past 11 o'clock, so I'm going to leave the last word to Mark Magruder before Stephanie and I wrap up. And as most people know, Mark's Australian Museum, and he and Harry and a bunch of others, including Joey, set up the Australasian Fish Project, which has been, in my view, absolutely fantastic for involving thousands of people and great knowledge. So, Mark, reflections on that project and where you think it'll go in the next 5 years as well?
Thanks, Adam. It's very good of you, Adam. Nice comments. The project's going very, very well. Pardon me. We've now got over 500,000 observations submitted by members. We've got 4,000 people that have actually signed up and get our journals. Susan, of course, from Norfolk Island is one of our stars. She's done really, really well. Resources aren't a big problem, really, financial resources, because I'm retired, I'm a senior fellow, so I've got the time to do it, but it does take a lot of time. And it concerns me that, when I pop off the perch, which isn't going to happen for some time, I hope, somebody's got to step in. Harry Rosenthal, as we've mentioned already, has done a lot of bio blurbs, which gives the community a better feel for the other members, which is really, really good. As for where it's going, that's a $64,000 question. I really have no idea. Our data is absorbed by ALA. But yeah, I think we're just going to carry on at the moment. Funding isn't a big problem because it's all done on a voluntary basis. As for where we're going, hard to say. When we started off the project, Harry Rosenthal and I compared it to a Honda Jazz, and we said, wouldn't it be nice if we have a Ferrari? Well, I believe we've almost got a Ferrari now, but still there are questions as to what are the outcomes. Building membership and building numbers of observations and what have you, all very well and good, but it's the outcomes that are important. And there have been probably half a dozen at least scientific papers published that use Australasian fishes data. We've recently published, self-published a book on Sydney Harbour fishes, which sold out very, very quickly. And that used photographs directly from iNaturalist, with permission, of course. So we utilised the photographs of 350 photographers to produce this book. And that wouldn't have been possible without iNaturalist and Australasian Fishes Project. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Mark. Stephanie, any final thoughts or reflections from you as to, what you got out of today and going forward?
I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to connect with everybody as well. And thank you, Adam, for sort of initiating and bringing everybody together and also initiating the paper too. Would really like to continue those conversations. I'll put my email and, Adam, you probably all know his email as well in the chat. Really, I think that coordination piece is really important. AXA is very interested in that too. We also rely on volunteer time to do that. So, and I'm very much into where can we support existing things. Like Greta said, there's shiny, bright things, but and also support for those sort of points of those key infrastructures I talk about, technical infrastructures, iLateralist, that's still, volunteer donation funded as well, and support for those core organisational infrastructures as well. That's my last bit. And again, thank you everyone for participating and welcome your comments to the document too.
Yeah. And look, from my perspective, I'm happiest in the water counting fish, and I got out there on Sunday, which was awesome. But I also recognise that what we're doing is fragmented and it could be so much better if we were a lot more collaborative. I think we also need to raise our voices. And last year I presented at the AXA conference that no, the government's got it wrong. There's not 100 to 130,000 citizen scientists in Australia. There's actually over 1 million. So if the government can get it wrong by tenfold, and there is an opportunity for voters, for funding, for impact, for integration. We need to try and find a mechanism through a discussion paper or a white paper, talking to the right ministers to support our backbone organisations and our champions. And, that's the Bills and the Jodies and the Gretas and the Cassies and the Marks to not only keep on doing what they're doing, but to bring us together, because that's really also where you can help each other. And, Mark's doing a great job, but I haven't seen him in person, and I haven't dived with him. And I think that's really quite unusual, because a lot of other organizations get together for an annual conference or a workshop or strategic planning or whatever. So this is the start. Let's see where we go. I'm so pleased that AXA is involved as the peak body. I think that you are going to really help us collectively take the next step. So I'll stop now. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll share the recording. Please do the survey, have a read of the discussion paper, and contact Stephanie or I if you've got any other questions. So have a great day and a great Valentine's Day. See you guys.